last year. Great range of contributors. Vince Cable did us a forward. Analysts working in the industry, journalists, economists, academics. We've got a Unite the Union perspective in there because that's a really interesting survey they've done of how companies have been, kind of using Brexit in some cases to force change on workers as well. And then a perspective from Alex from how Australia lost its entire auto industry down under. Interesting chapter to finish off. So what we're doing is we're looking at this industry. It's very much at the heart of some of the issues around Brexit, given the sort of sophisticated just-in-time supply chains that cross borders many times. So if we're ending up leaving the EU and putting in place more friction of whatever sort, it's going to have an impact on those supply chains. Also, depending on the form of Brexit, we could face tariffs in 2020 and all sorts of other issues. So you can buy copies here today. There's a free Kindle version as well available on Amazon. So the book sold very well last time, partly because it's free on Kindle. The first issue, very well reviewed. Peter Campbell of Financial Times, is really well put together. Hard-hitting, couldn't be more timely. Alan Tony of The Telegraph, essential reading to inform your views, no matter if you're a Remain or a Leaver. We've got a variety of perspectives in the book. Some of us who are quite concerned about the potential impact of Brexit, others who say actually the industry can still prosper. So we've tried to look for different perspectives. Although I must say in the car industry that's quite difficult. The industry has a pretty clear view that Brexit is going to cause issues and they can't really see an upside of it, quite honestly. So very quickly, I just want to make a few points about Brexit, some broader market trends, policy issues, and the fact that the industry anyway is probably going to see more change in the next 10, 15 years than in the previous 100 years. So huge changes will be taking place. We're going to have to do things to prepare for that anyway, regardless of Brexit. And we've got to have to reevaluate our industrial policy. What we do know is the market, and Ian will talk about this more, the market was down last year. Car registrations down 2.4% in the UK, on the back of even bigger falls back in 2018 and 17. Partly, that's because the economy has slowed. So Brexit, we think, has already led to the UK economy being 3 to 4% smaller than it would have been otherwise in the absence of that vote. So slower economic growth, slower car sales because they're big ticket items. The car industry is very cyclical. So consumers and firms holding off on spending money on big ticket items. Also bear in mind the big shift away from diesels that is taking place. Diesel sales down another 20% last year, that's right, Ian? Yeah. On the back of big falls the year before and the year before that. Some evidence that maybe in Europe this is coming to an end, but that's partly artificially propped up in Germany through a scrappage scheme. So I think that shift away from diesels will continue. People holding off on replacing a diesel because they don't know what to do still. Also, there was some supply-side disruption coming into the beginning of the year through a new testing regime, which had an impact on the supply of some cars. Car production down up to November, 14.5%. I think we've got new figures today, in fact, for the year as a whole. We know that there were plant closures in the spring and in the autumn around the original Brexit deadline. So in April, car output down 45% compared to the year before because car companies shut down. They didn't know what the form of Brexit would be. They prepared for the worst case scenario. They were concerned about supply chain disruption. They shut their plants down. So big plant shutdowns in the spring and then the autumn. But more generally also, slow sales, for example, at the likes of JLR, around some of their diesel cars, affecting the Castle Bromwich plant not very far from here. So we've got this combination of the Brexit slowdown, the demise of diesels, but also turmoil in China. So JLR in particular affected by the downturn there in China. It's starting to come back a bit, but exports from the UK at the beginning of last year to China down by something like 75%. So that we are affected by all of these different factors. So we saw lots of bad news. Honda confirmed their closure, Ford the Bridgend closure. Nissan pulled the X-Trail model from Sunderland and also cancelled future Infinity work there. Question mark about what comes next in terms of the Vauxhall and the Astra comes to report, and also whether the Qashqai will go ahead at Sunderland. So in terms of rolling car output year to year, we saw it peak in late 2016, it's been in decline ever since. It's quite a telling graph. Diesels decline. It wasn't that long ago, late 2015, diesel was 50% of the market. By even early 2018, down to 32%. Been declining ever since. That's a trend you see across the EU, even to the point where this is a photo from Matthias Schmidt in Germany. This is a German newspaper cover. You're now leaving the diesel sector, mock-up of the Checkpoint Charlie So this is a trend across Europe that's taking place. So remember, diesels are quite a recent phenomenon. So if we go back to the start of the century, diesel share was probably about 20% in Europe. We then gave loads of tax breaks and back-and-load tailpipe CO2 emissions, which inflated the market. Dieselgate scandal, now in free fall, probably get back to where it started, to be honest. Remember, in other car markets around the world, diesel share in Japan probably 4%, in the US, less than 1%. So European firms particularly exposed to this shift away from diesels. The other big issue that's come up the agenda in the wake of Dieselgate is air quality. So we've now got a whole range of these clean air zones introduced in the UK, including one here in Birmingham. We should have had at the back end of last year the clean air zone enforced, and people driving older cars, pre-diesel 6 cars, being charged to come into the city. Central government screwed up on the software around that, as far as I can understand. We're not able to get it in place. We expect it in July. I don't think we'll even get it there, maybe the end of this year. But we're likely to see clean air zone in Birmingham at the end of this year, people driving older cars being charged to drive in. That will accelerate the shift, I think, away from diesels locally, even though Euro 6 qualifies, and they shift towards hybrids and electrics. Remember as well, bans on ICE, internal combustion engine only vehicles coming in many countries, some as early as 2025, in the UK it's 2040. So all of these big changes taking place. In terms of Brexit, huge uncertainty has damaged investment, down by 80% over the last 3 years. There are some really big decisions looming. Peugeot has said it wants to build the Astra model at Elgin Port in 2021, but in the event of no deal and tariffs, it will pull that and shift it to Southern Europe. Whether if we have a bare bones trade deal that eliminates tariffs, but there are still customs delays, whether that will be enough to get that decision over the line, I don't know. But I welcome Ian's comments on that. Nissan have also said they will re-evaluate the decision on the Qashqai to be built in Sunderland from this year in the event of the fall of Brexit becoming clearer. So big issues around trading arrangements. If at the end of this year we end up without a deal, 10% tariffs, that's going to have a very big impact on Apple. Ian will talk more about that. But even if we have a bare bones trade deal that eliminates most tariffs, to qualify, UK-made cars need to qualify under the rules of origin, which require 60% local content. 57. Okay. Local content. We're way off that. So there's going to have to be some sort of agreement with the EU to count EU content. They'll want something in return for that. There'll have to be a deal around it. Customs delays hugely important. Over 1,000 container loads of parts coming into the UK every year to UK car plants. Honda alone at Swindon, 2 million components coming into the factory on a daily basis. They said that if they needed to stockpile the components that were coming in, it would require the biggest building in the world, and there simply isn't the space to do it. So huge volumes coming in. Even a small delay is going to throw a spanner in the works of those just-in-time systems. So car companies will have to stockpile parts. That will push up costs, make the UK a less attractive place. That's before we get onto things like regulation. The industry wants to see regulatory alignment. The more we diverge, the more checks there are likely to be at the border. Skills, 1 in 10 workers in UK manufacturing from another EU country. Alex will talk about this more in the case of the West Midlands, where we think it's much higher. And also money for research. A lot of money come into research in the industry for things like the European Investment Bank. Billions, in fact. How are we going to replace that? So some really big issues around Brexit. One of the key things is that investment has been reduced over the last 3 years by something like 80%. Firms are holding off on the investment, waiting to see what will happen. Now, the longer that goes on, the more that we risk losing the investments in the big new technologies that are coming. And we've had warnings from the likes of JLR. They've said that in the event of no deal at the end of this year, they're talking about a £1.2 billion hit to profits, although my back of the envelope calculation suggests it's higher than that. And that would lead to tens of thousands of job cuts, raise question marks about big investment in the UK. And a key point is, even if we have a trade deal, which Johnson seems to be aiming for in the political declaration, that won't sort the customs issues. We'll be outside the customs union. There's likely to be customs checks, disruption for supply chains. And the industry is transforming itself. Big investment in a whole range of new technologies. So autonomous driving technologies, electric mobility, lightweight materials, platform sharing, connected cars. The car I drive, I can control all of it from my phone already. Can turn it on and off. Great if it gets nicked, just turn it off. If it's not very far away, I can summon it, it will come and get me. Loads of technologies that are coming. The uncertainty over Brexit means we could lose investment in a lot of those key technologies and affect the competitiveness of the industry going forward. The other point is that I think this year is basically year zero for electric vehicles in Europe. From here on in, I expect there to be very rapid take-up with a tipping point in the early to mid-2020s as they begin to outcompete the internal combustion engine. So we're really going to see a push towards electrics from here on in. We want to see electric cars made in the UK. Honda's saying that from 2021 it is not going to be making the Civic in the UK. It's basically saying the UK is an attractive place to make electric cars there. That's a pretty big kicking for the government's industrial strategy, which is about shifting the UK towards making electric cars. Autonomous cars are coming, but much more slowly. So key takeaways, electric cars are coming more quickly, autonomous cars are coming much more slowly. I think what we will see are more and more autonomous driving features in our cars, but full autonomy is still a long way off. And they're kind of big changes in the industrial sort of ecosystem that many have forecast are still quite a way off. But big investment needed in autonomous cars and electric cars. Big car companies are having to team up. Even Ford and Volkswagen are having to get together to be able to pool resources in electric and autonomous cars going forward. That means JLR, as a small player, is increasingly going to have to collaborate. So it's collaborating with BMW on electric motors, on internal combustion engines. I expect that to move on into sharing platforms as well. So, huge uncertainty around Brexit. No deal, as Ian will talk about, I think would be catastrophic for the industry. Even a bare bones trade deal would be problematic. Things like rules of origin, customs delays, issues over regulatory alignment. Ideally, the auto industry wants to see a sector deal that keeps it as close as possible to Europe, to the single market and inside the customs union. Whether that is doable with the direction of travel in the UK at the moment, I think is a very big question. Some other issues, government needs to clean up its policy on diesel, excuse the pun. Very mixed messages from the government around diesels, and we need a much better industrial strategy for electric vehicles in particular. A final point is that EU standards and regulations, the UK actually were very good at influencing them. So if you look at the emissions regulations in Europe, the UK has really shaped them to support small companies in the UK like some of the small sports car manufacturers, but also Jaguar Land Rover as a relatively small player. Will no longer be able to do that. So JLR, for example, will increasingly have to look to the Slovakian government, where it has a plan, to then influence regulation. So we're going to have to think at a government level of working with other governments to shape things. A few quick points to finish off. Our industrial strategy has got to go a lot further. You know, if Brexit's telling us one thing, if we want a car industry in the UK or we want manufacturing, we've really got to step up our industrial strategy. One of the things we need to do to anchor production in the UK is to attract one of these big battery plants to make batteries very cheaply. We are missing that in the UK. We've got to actually really develop our industrial strategy and give a very clear direction of travel that we are going towards electric cars in a big way. That means aligning subsidies, tax rates, infrastructure, policy in terms of business take-up of cars and everything. Norway have done that. So for the first time last month, electric car sales had over 50% of the market. They outsold the internal combustion engine. So it can be done. Question of whether we want to do it. Thank you very much. Over to Ian in terms of the impacts of Brexit.
Okay, well, thank you. Various things to say. First of all, the cost of UK vehicle manufacturing will of course depend at the end of the day on the nature of the Brexit deal that is finally done come the end of the year. I've modelled the impact in particular of a no deal or a hard Brexit, which would be going to WTO terms and the 10% tariff and some of the worst things that David was just talking about. A little bit more complicated just a 10% tariff on finished cars, because you also have to factor in tariffs on components. Now I know the government has said that it would zero rate imported components, but the EU would still levy tariffs on components exported from the UK into the EU. And that would be particularly complicated or costly for Jaguar Land Rover, which ships engines and parts to make vehicles both in Slovakia but also in Austria, where it has a contract production arrangement with Magnum. It will be particularly complicated or costly for Nissan, which ships a lot of parts Spain, but also to the Renault plant or various Renault plants across Europe. BMW's pressing plant in Swindon ships a lot of pressing, not just to the Mini factory in Oxford, but also to the Mini factory in the Netherlands, and a couple of parts also on the BMW 2 series made in Leipzig. You've got a whole variety of issues like that. There are a couple of suppliers up located near to Sunderland who don't supply this end. They ship to tier 1 suppliers such as ZF and TRW in continental Europe. They will face tariffs on their parts going into Europe. The cost to UK car producers, based on last year's production volumes, would be about 3.25 billion a year. We need to probably increase that by about another 20% to factor in the cost of the component sector. In addition, the other tariff factor that doesn't directly affect manufacturers, but it does, or UK manufacturers, is the costs of UK plans to put tariffs on imported vehicles at 10%. Vehicles that come in from the EU, which currently is that 10% is of course applied to vehicles from outside the EU as well. And looking at UK sales and registration and the average selling price in the UK and so forth, that would cost you British consumers around 4.2 billion a year. Or maybe not quite so much because demand would probably fall. It's also worth noting, and I think there's one of the chapters in the book suggests that, basically that UK car production switched to home demand to help counter the effect of tariffs. It's a little bit more difficult to do than it might sound, because British consumers generally don't buy British-made vehicles. If you take the top 10 vehicles sold in the UK, only one of them is made in the Sound Qashqai. SMT put out figures which includes Mini in that category, but actually it's slightly misleading because about 40% of the Minis sold in this country aren't made in this country. They're actually made in Holland, as I indicated before. Now, it's not just tariffs that are an issue, it's also the potential loss of economic value, economic activity, because tariffs would definitely hit production, as would compliance issues to do with origin requirements, disruption of the border, and so on and so forth. The modelling which I've done, which is in line with some of the figures produced by LNC, which are also in this report, suggests that between now and about 2024-25, the UK would lose cumulatively about 1.5 million vehicles against what it would produce in normal circumstances. And again, if you adjust that figure to take into account the different mix of vehicles from Astons through to Rolls Royces, the loss of value created or factory gate prices over that period is at least 43 billion, or more than 8 billion a year on average. Now, I don't think you need to be a rocket scientist or a particularly sophisticated economist to realise that it's very difficult for an industry which is either making no money or very little money to be able to survive when it is faced with additional costs of manufacturing operation of 3.5 billion a year and loss of economic output worth 8 billion a year. One final, two final points I want to make. One to do with the US market, whether that could be a saviour or not to the UK. Jaguar Land Rover Mini, as well as the low volume people like Rolls Royce, already sell in the US, and probably they've achieved pretty close to the maximum market share they would ever like to get based on their resources and model ranges. The other manufacturers in the UK, Nissan, Toyota, PSA, Vauxhall exist to supply the European market. It's true that Honda has shipped some, or has been shipping some vehicles to the US, but that was a temporary issue, reflecting some unique circumstances within Honda. Now, the interesting thing about the US, which many people don't know, in fact, several people who gave evidence to select committees in the government and the government itself got this completely wrong. Said that the US imposed a 10% tariff on cars. Completely wrong. The US imposed a 2.5% tariff. So in fact, the US is actually more tariff-friendly on whatever market than Europe is already, which is an interesting point. Now, of course, Mr. Trump has been proposing the idea of I was saying that the US only charges 2.5% tariff. Makes it, from that perspective, a 10%. Now, President Trump has suggested that he could actually raise that, all sorts of reasons why not, he would have to get 25%. So I did some calculation of what would that impact on Jaguar Land Rover, particularly in light of the fact that the government was saying the other day it's going to proceed with this 2% digital tax to raise money from Amazon and the like in this country. Now, I don't know too much about the digital industry, but I did read a report on the very reliable BBC which said that the government was expecting that this digital tax would raise £500 million. Might be a lot of money to your eye, but it's minuscule in the grand scheme of things. Now, last year, Jaguar Land Rover sold about 116,000 UK made vehicles in the US, 126,000 if you take the European made vehicles. With an average landed value in the States of about £55,000, those cars, that's at 2.5%, that's just under £1,400 of tariff per car, which multiplied by 126,000 is about 173 million. If you increase that tenfold from 2.5% to 25%, obviously you get to 1.73 billion. In other words, the tariff impact on Jaguar Land Rover, if the US did what it says it's going to do, would be more than 3 times the government's expected tax take from the digital tax. And that's just for one company. That's sort of the kind of policy issues that, or facts that need to get considered when making policy issues. And just one other point I would like to just about going back to the UK and Brexit last year. David's entirely right that there was a lot of shutdowns in April and November. But I think in fairness, and I have to be fair on these occasions, the 2 major shutdowns in April, BMW Mini and Vauxhall, were really shutdowns that were brought forward from the summer because they were both planning model changeovers, and in fact, by bringing forward those changeovers, they thought they were saving on disruption by coinciding their adjustments to plant with when they're expecting disruption from Brexit. Of course, that meant that the people who were expecting a summer holiday in August couldn't have one because they had their summer holiday in April. But that's life in Britain today.
Okay, thank you very much. Tom, would you like to
Sure.
add any perspectives?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tom Leeson. I'm Global Industry Lead for Manufacturing for a Canadian software company called OpenText. We're a $3 billion company and we specialise in what we call enterprise information management, the digitisation of data. So it's a great time for me to have this job because the new economy of business, of course, is data and how you manage data, digital transformation. And particularly the automotive industry is in a huge shake-up as we move towards connected, autonomous, shared electrification of vehicles. So there's already extremely high disruption in the manufacturing industry. So I'm an engineer by trade, I'm a mathematician by education, and I have a passion and love for manufacturing. I've been in the business about 40 years, and I still believe today there's no better time to be in the business right now, because I will say never think of turning down the challenge of a crisis. This is a better time than ever for the, particularly the UK manufacturing industry, to reset itself. It is going to be painful. We will take a step backwards before we come forwards. But how I got into Brexit was a couple of years ago. I was approached by a large OEM customer in the UK, an automotive customer, who asked one of our sales guys, "Have you got anything for Brexit?" As if it was just like, let's take a pill and let's forget all about it. only wish. So I took the challenge. We actually thought, well, no, because nobody knows anything. We just know it's going to allegedly happen. So I took the challenge. I actually commissioned a sponsored report and some analysis work with Professor Ruyter and his team here at the Centre of Brexit Studies. And we spent over a year analysing the potential effects, all the scenarios, potential effects of the impact of Brexit in the UK automotive industry and particularly its supply chain. So as I said, my company specialises in digitisation. We talk about Industry 4.0, the industrial Internet of Things, and one of David's slides there it showed the various digitisation things that are available for the industry. There was a logo up there called OnStar. OnStar was the original consumer vehicle interaction, opening your car, starting your engine, and OpenText is actually responsible for that. That's our technology. So right at the beginning of the project, I always said, if at all possible, plan for the worst and hope for the best. And I know, particularly in our supply chain and our SME market, that's not possible. People can't afford to throw away money, but at the same time, people can't afford not to do anything. And when I say take advantage of that crisis, manufacturing businesses should be transforming their business anyway to be competitive, and the way to transform your business is to digitize your business. And I'm not here to sell anything, so I'm not going to go into the details of how you achieve that. But we've made good, we've learned a lot, and we've made good forward advances, particularly with a number of OEMs across Europe and also in the UK. Because remember, there's two sides to this coin. It's not just about what the UK loses, it's also what the European Union loses, and also what the rest of the world might gain. Because I travel the world roughly a week every month, so I get a very good general perspective. So there is steps that industry can take. They have to take them anyway, if they're going to remain competitive in their business. So I don't think it's all going to doom, but I still think there's a lot of questions to be answered. So I would quite happy, to discuss that with anybody. If anybody has any ideas, if it comes up in the Q&A. I'm a technologist, and that's really where my heart and my business is. So I think it's solvable, for sure. I don't think we'll disappear, but I think we've got a lot of challenges ahead that we need to take face on. Thanks very much.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Thank you. Tom and Ian have got chapters in the book, a range of different perspectives, so I hope you find it interesting. We've got time for comments.
We do, yeah. We have about 20 minutes for questions, folks. Questions?